see, there are lots of grants here. We are moving forward. As I mentioned, the areas of persistent poverty, I sat through a seminar to see what they're looking for this next iteration. On the previous slide, you saw we did submit last year. So we're just really focused on finding ways to leverage the dollars we have currently and get additional grant dollars. So did want to, I know there were a couple of requests to understand what we've been doing, so thought it would be good to share that with you today. Any questions? Yes, Ms. Orr.
Thank you, Ms. LeGrand. One of the key focus areas that you talked about when you onboarded was grant writing and making sure to expand our area of opportunity and to leverage some of the grants that are there. And you're doing exactly that. So thank you so much for making that happen, even if you have to get subject matter experts by paragraph. So I think that's a really good experience, leverage all your opportunities. Also, from the city standpoint, showing the support through action as well as through dollars, and so that it's just commendable. You continue with your commitment, Mayor Castor. Just really appreciate that continued message that is throughout everything you do and everything, the thread of the fiber of the plan. I do want to ask a question specific to the bus stops and so forth. And is there a minimum standard as we continue to leverage, getting everything standardized, making sure we have certain shelters and seating opportunities for, and making sure people ride with dignity? As we leverage the grants and start to spend the dollars and execute, are there minimum standards that we should expect per stop?
That is a great question, and yes, so typically you would have design standards, and then we would also have in our plan, our Title VI plan, the requirements for what type of amenities you have at a station based on the ridership, right? So if you have a station where, let's just say in a day you have less than 5 riders, that would dictate what type of amenity you would have, versus if you have a stop that within a day you have 50 people who either get on or get off the bus at that stop. So the team goes through the analysis, we determine what the demand is at a location, and then put an amenity out that is best suited. In addition, what we are also looking at doing is standardizing our shelters and amenities so that when we have to do repairs, the maintenance shop has one set of, I would say, tools and equipment that's needed to do the repairs. So what you don't want is to have something that's like really fancy and elaborate one place and it requires a special, screw and special nuts and the such, and then another one requires something totally different. We're trying to standardize it. So our team, they have gone through the process, and I signed off on a new design standard, and we're also ordering new shelters that fit that design standard. And the last thing I'd say is that we've also transitioned to a modular approach. So, in some locations the shelters are larger because of the right-of-way that's available. So if we have a location where there's less right-of-way, the shelter will look similar, it'll just be smaller, instead of looking like a totally different shelter, so that this way, again, we can still have the same tools to go out there and repair it, and it's the same look and feel, so you still get the same experience, regardless if you're boarding from a stop where only one person a day boards, or a stop where 25 people a day.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So the amenities are based on the ridership?
At the location. So again, if you have a location where there's more boardings, you'll have a bigger trash can, right? Because the expectation is that there's going to be more people boarding, so you need like a larger trash can. So yes.
Okay. And then if there are no amenities, just the stop itself, that would indicate to me that there are probably not as many riders.
That should be the indication that you receive. But as we move forward, what we're looking to do for every stop is to provide real-time information. So we're looking at how we change even the flags. We're looking, so right now you see the bus stop and it says HART and there's like a sticker with a number on it. So we're even looking at redesigning the actual flag so that when you come to the stop, even if it's just a stick stop, it still is a little more upgraded than what we see here. And then we are also looking on the pole. They have something that kind of looks like an iPad, and that will scroll the real-time information. So even if our plan is, even if you're at a bus stop, that doesn't have a big shelter, you will still have access to real-time information, a trash receptacle, a bench, just all the amenities that we need. That's our objective.
Okay, all right, thank you. This is very important. I think education and awareness is a key aspect of me being on this board, and understanding that logic and algorithm as we move forward is something that we can educate the community on when they have those type of questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Johnson, did you have before? Does anyone else?
Yeah, I do.
Mayor
I
Castro.
just want to build on what Melanie said. It's so important as we try to increase the ridership on the buses that we have reliable routes and times, but also the cleanliness of the bus stops. And so we have a really great partnership between the City of Tampa and HART, our code enforcement, and then also looking to bring the businesses in too, that they can adopt a stop if it's in front of their business, and just trying to keep all of those locations clean, because the perception is that the cleanliness is associated with the safety of that particular location. And I think that that's very, very important, and something that I know the director is focused on, and we are as well in the city.
Commissioner Myers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things I'd like to address, and thank you, Ms. LeGrand, for your comments. In District 3, there's a lot of bus stops, but there's no shelter or anything, so they're just standing out in the sun. Would some of those become a top priority when you go out to look at those first?
Yes.
How would that be addressed?
So what we're doing, and we have a database already of identifying where we don't have shelters, where we have the right-of-way to put in a shelter, and then where we don't have an ADA compliant stop. So if you think of it in those buckets, we're prioritizing ADA to make sure that every stop is ADA compliant, and then we're looking at stops that don't have shelters so that we can implement shelters across the service area, and then understanding where the right-of-way may not permit having a shelter, what kind of amenity. I do like this one thing. It looks like a little umbrella with a seat. I think I'm the only one who likes the way that looks. But there are other things out there that, maybe requires less right-of-way, but it does give you, the protection from the sun. So we are looking at other options as well.
Thank you.
Anyone? I think that was a really excellent discussion, and I'm sorry.
You're fine. Go ahead and finish.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, mine was a little bit unrelated to what Commissioner Myers had just said, more on the personnel side. So if you wanted to finish the thought, I'll be glad to.
Well, I just thought it was a really excellent discussion. I think our stops have suffered for a long time here, and it's really a perception of the agency as, a service, but that is really what people see as they're driving along, and it's so significant and important, and I've certainly seen issues with that. I know, as well as the ridership, there's also sometimes constraints on the size. I just think it's important because we can have high ridership in areas that have very little right-of-way. That's an opportunity. In fact, that's exactly what I have at the end of my street. The stop I take has a pole on a 2-foot sidewalk, and it's, on Route 2, one of the, main ridership areas, routes. So that's really significant, but I just think this can really transform the way that that HART is perceived. I think it's just extraordinarily important, and I'm so pleased to see that we're having attention and focus on this, because I think it really can change the perception of HART's service in the community. Director Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, Ms. LeGrand, thank you for the update. I know we had numerous conversations, about where we were at on some of these grants, and I appreciate being able to see exactly where we're at on that. You had made a comment about not having a grant writer and not being, and having to essentially farm out everything to folks within the organization to be able to do it. And the first question that I had on that is, do we have a position open for a grant writer? Has this been something we haven't been able to hire, or is it just we're just watching the pennies right now and not hiring that?
So, all great questions. We do not have, and did not have when I started here, a position that was a grant writer. And what I have not done is created a new standalone position for a grant writer, because it's not a full-time job, at least where we are right now. So what we have done is the team, based on the subject matter experts, they tackle responding to the different sections. And we have a consultant under our on-call consultant agreement who we then send our document to, and they go through it, and they do the QA review, and they clean it up so it sounds like it came from one voice, and then they add the little sparkles to it. And I think this approach works for us for a couple of reasons. It goes back to something that many of you have said even today. It's the education. And these grant applications, they're not grants for just one type of service. Most of the applications require input from finance, require input from planning. And the last one for the heavy maintenance facility, one of our team members had to actually write a report on how we transitioned to zero emission vehicles, because that had to be attached to the grant application. So the more that the team gets familiar with going through the process, and you are responsible for writing 2 paragraphs, I believe that it's invaluable that our team is now educated and knowledgeable on what's required to respond to grants, what they need to know about their specific area, and how they get to translate it into a language that a grant, host, I don't know what you call the people who put out the grant sponsor, is looking for. And I would say over the last year, and I'm speaking for the teams that I hope they're in agreement, they've become more comfortable responding, and we need to own our voice. So I do think the approach that we have right now for the volume of grants that we're looking at is manageable. But if we get to a point, and we also, and this is something I didn't mention, we need to have more local match so that we can go after these grants. So what we're doing is we're using the same $3 as local match for all these grants. So once, we get, let's say we get the $25 million grant, the gig is up, right? Because we don't have any more local matching dollars. So that's the other thing. We have to be strategic until we get to a place where we do have a sustainable funding source as a local match. Then I think it would be appropriate to hire somebody full-time, because we can go after it and we'll have more local matching dollars, and we wouldn't be playing 3-card Monte with our dollars right now.
Yeah, and you hit the second part of that when it came to the consultant, how we're actually going through and getting the real subject matter experts to be able to look at that. Obviously, your team is subject matter experts as
Right.
well. So I'm glad to hear that we're doing that. Would love to be able to see you have, resources later on down the road to where we do have the ability to go after even more, because obviously we got a lot going on here. Want to be able to try and maximize as many dollars as we can. So I think we're in a good spot there, and I appreciate that. One quick question: the areas of persistent poverty grant, what agency was that coming out of? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Ms. Wright, no, that's fine. Ms. Wright, do you mind stepping up and talking about this one?
Good morning, Board. The Areas of Persistent Poverty Grant was offered for the first time last year. It was in the spring. It came from the FTA.
Oh, okay.
And it was a pilot grant. A decision hasn't been made. And what we spoke to was transportation in food deserts. So the drafting of the grant, depending upon how you were applying, you talked about transit and how it could help areas of persistent poverty. So we spoke to food deserts.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this?
I think somebody online.
Oh, Commissioner Overman, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner
I tried to
Overman.
use the hand thing. I tried to use the hand thing. It didn't really work. So
No, it was up there.
I want to thank everyone for their questions because it actually did a beautiful job of covering several things that I was going to mention. But as we heard from Director Johnson, the presentation on the pending competitive federal applications is terrific. Thank you very much for that hard work. And your entire team is doing a great job of going to find those resources that are so very much needed in our area. On that same page where you listed the persistent poverty one, the bus facilities one, and the community project funding grant request, there's mention about the 2023 appropriations, and likely in December of 22, but that could be impacted by outcome of midterms. That probably much of ours was discussed too. Much of what we're looking at in the way of competitive grants all require matching dollars for the most part. Is that accurate, including these three that are listed here?
That is correct.
Okay, so I appreciate the moving the monies around in order to be able to qualify for these grants, but it makes a further case that it's critically important that HART receives a steady stream of incomes in order to be able to qualify for the federal dollars out there. You mentioned the consultant that's providing us with guidance on grant opportunities, and I would imagine that has to do with the infrastructure bill. Is that in addition to what FTA normally offers?
Director Overman, do you mind reposing your question? I'm unsure.
Okay. So our consultant, and I'm trying to figure out which one we are depending on for grant identification, but or support, is doing both FTA regular types of grant applications as well as looking and exploring where the most recent infrastructure bill grant buckets lie, I would assume.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So we have a couple of different consultants doing different work. So we do have our consultants that help us with lobbying or advocacy, and they're the ones that's Holland and Knight, and they help us on the state, local, and federal level. So they cull through all sorts of, databases and provide us with a list of grant opportunities that are available. So that's the scope that they cover. And they also help us to advocate for our application. So if we put an application together and it's, we have to get a letter, let's say, from various people, they'll tell us, these are the folks who you need to reach out to, that type of work. For the actual submittal and writing of grant applications, that goes through our on-call contract that we have here at the agency. And that vendor or that consultant, they're the ones who go through and read the grant applications and help us to submit it. So if you think of it as a two-step process, one is to identify where the opportunities are and help us to understand where we're best positioned to be successful. And then the other is the implementation, where they're actually helping us to submit the application.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Grant coordination is a tough job. So I appreciate that you've got so many in the queue. It also helps, explain why it's so critically important that our referendum this fall passes, because it makes that work even more productive when we're able to have the matching dollars once we get a decision, or at least a pending decision, depending on whether or not we have the money to make the match. So thank you so much for this work. It's so important, and it really will make a difference to our community. I appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome. And lastly, I would say is that, this approach for us to do, I would say, the upfront writing during the draft document, it also allows us to not spend as much money in our contract with the vendor, because we don't have a lot of money in our on-call either. If you recall, we got approval to move forward with the on-call with maximum amount for fiscal 22, I think, of around $300,000. So if we had them actually write all the grant applications, we would have been out of money. So this approach allows us to still leverage their expertise, but also stretch the dollars so we can apply for more grants and still have their team available to help us.
Thank you. And with that, one more fast question. How many stops do we have approximately?
We have approximately 2,300 bus stops.
That is, I can't keep that number in my head because it's so big. That's a lot of work. It's a big job. And when you think of any one stop you see or think about, and then you realize that there's, 2,200 and something more of them, it's a really big task to handle. So thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the Chair's report. I've little to report at this time, except that was a great CEO's report, and I'd just like to recognize that Director Hudson, who's not here this morning, has a newborn. So that's a moment of celebration for us. So I'd just like to... Oh, so does Director Frazier? Oh, I wasn't told that. Oh, my goodness. Wow, 2 directors in a week. The HART family's growing. Thank you for making me aware of that. I had not heard that. So it's a big week. A lot more stops and babies. And with that, we will move on to the General Counsel's report.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to follow up on a request and comment that Commissioner Myers made at the last meeting related to some employee complaints that had been sent over to members of the Board of County Commissioners. I had sent out a memorandum just describing the process under your board policies to have those all sent to me so that I can review them and decide and look at your policies and decide the proper place those need to go. And I finalized my review. I'm going to go ahead and send those out later this week to the administration for their portal of employee complaints, and additionally I will send those out to members of the board so that you can review them. They are in essence employee complaints that should be properly handled under your board of policies through the employment services. I'm available for any questions on that issue, and thank you. I appreciate that the Board of County Commissioners who had sent me the complaints that they've received so that we could get them processed properly. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Commissioner Myers?
Then we'll be able to discuss it after the entire board has received the comments and administration at our next board meeting in August. Thank you.
With that, I'm sorry, yes, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. And Ms. Mandel, some of these anonymous complaints, it's not possible for us to tell how many are coming from the same individual or anything, or even to vet them. So if you would, while we're talking about it, discuss the procedure that HART has in place for whistleblower complaints to be able to, be anonymous if need be, but go through the proper channels.
That's correct. Within HART, there is a whistleblower complaint process under which if an employee or anybody else has a complaint that they want to make anonymously as a whistleblower, that process exists. I believe there's an email address for that. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can make that available to anybody who wants that. And if somebody needs to get that information, they can contact me anonymously, and I'm happy to provide that for them. These particular complaints, from what I understand, did not come into HART. They actually came to all of the members of the Board of County Commissioners, even ones that were not are not also on the HART board. So I think ensuring that they get into the proper process is very important, and I appreciate that everybody who had them from the Board of County Commissioners sent this to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about this at this time? And is there anything else with the General Counsel's report?
I don't have anything else. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And congratulations to all the new babies.
And with that, we'll move to old business. Is there any old business that anyone wants to raise? New business? Any new business? Seeing none and no more babies to announce, we'll stand adjourned.